Hey there, my name is Lee Meadows, and in this video I go over 3 strategies that will help you learn more effectively in an online course. The video covers finding a schedule, finding a social support network, and finding ways to really think well in an online environment. I've been teaching for over 25 years now. Of course, my practice started well before there was any such thing as online. So I began in the face-to-face classroom, and that's where I worked hard to find out how do students really learn well. When online learning started coming in, I moved slow in the transition to online because I wanted to teach my students well, whether I was teaching face-to-face or blended or online. So this video goes over 3 things that I found that really do help students learn well. And one note, you probably noticed that I'm not sitting in a classroom and I'm not sitting in my office. I'm shooting this video from my home because so many times when we're learning online, we're at home or we're in a coffee shop. We're not in a regular academic setting. I wanted to be able to showcase some of the advantages those settings have for learning and also some of the challenges they create for us when we're learning online. So what kind of schedule should you follow for your online class? Well, that's a question you're going to need to put some thought into, because unlike the face-to-face class, no one else is going to answer that question for you. In the face-to-face classroom, time is typically structured for the students. You know when to arrive here. You know when you're going to leave. You even typically know what to focus on during the actual classroom because the instructor gives you some good cues about how the time is going to be apportioned during the lesson. You also know what to focus on outside of class because during class the instructor is making announcements about quizzes, about tests, about projects. The face-to-face classroom, often time is structured for the student. But what about when we're learning online and we're working at home or in a coffee shop or in one of the other places that we typically land for online learning, and those cues about how to set our schedule aren't there? After all, a kitchen table is just a kitchen table, and it doesn't tell us much about when to start studying or when to stop studying or what to do while we are studying. In fact, at home or a coffee shop, there's often a lot of built-in distractions that can get in the way of setting a good schedule for online learning. My son, who works full-time, was recently struggling with an online math course. He was struggling because the class was consuming all of his time outside of work. He felt like he was either at work or studying, and that's all he was doing with his life. As I listened to him, I realized he didn't have a schedule. So I encouraged him to set aside 2 or 3 blocks of time during his week to study for the class, dedicate his time during that time when it was scheduled, and walk away from the course when he wasn't scheduled to be studying. He did it, and it worked. He got his life back because he knew when he was at work, he knew when he was studying, and he knew when he had free time and could go on with the other things important in his life. So take a look at 3 possible study schedules. The one in yellow is for a morning person. They blocked out times of the morning when they're freshest and best to learn, including a Saturday morning, and then they've given a couple of evenings to catch up, even though evening isn't their best time to study. The schedule in red is for someone who has a lot of commitments during the day, but they found their best other times to study, starting on a Sunday evening, and then blocking out times during the day, one evening, and then reserving some time on Friday if they have to catch up because they hadn't finished everything they need to do in the course of the week. The blue schedule is for someone who can only study at night. Perhaps they work during the day, or perhaps their other class schedules fill up all of their days. They're going to study every weeknight, take Friday off, and then study on Saturday afternoon if they haven't finished everything they need to do. Now, I'm sure you realized in those last examples that they're simply examples. You'll need to find your own schedule that works for you with all of the other commitments and things going on in your life. The key isn't simply coming up with a schedule. The key is revising it until you find one that works for you. Just keep in mind, those cues won't be there like in the regular face-to-face classroom. Finding that schedule is something you're going to have to do on your own. A second key success strategy in learning well online is finding a social network. It's important, and it's something easy to forget about in online learning because it comes so naturally in the face-to-face classroom. Think for a minute about the social support the face-to-face classroom offers. And picture this classroom full of students, many of them you know because you're enrolled in the class and it's been going on for several weeks. So when you walk in the door and as you're coming in, you have social support. You can sit next to somebody you know, catch up, and you can say, hey, how's it going in the course? Then there's social support actually during the class itself. You might be just laughing at the professor's jokes and knowing, hey, I got it. Or you might be feeling the tension in the room because it's the day before a big test and you realize, ooh, at least I'm not the only one who's worried. And then think about the key social support when you're ready to leave. Because just the simple act of walking out the door is also social support because you know how many times you are checking in with somebody as you leave and saying, hey, you know that test tomorrow? Let's get together tonight over coffee and let's study. It's social support, and it's built into the face-to-face classroom. But how does social support work in a place like this, your favorite coffee shop? A lot of times people choose a coffee shop or some place like that to do online learning because it's quiet, free from distractions, but you're not totally isolated. There are people around. The problem, though, is they're not the people that you need on your team for learning in your course. You're over there at that table by yourself. And the very people that could provide the social support you need for learning aren't in the room with you. So what kind of social support do you need in your online class? And we all need social support. Learning research has made it pretty clear that people have different preferences for how they like to learn socially. Some people learn best on their own. They truly learn well when they are alone. Other people learn best in a group. They truly learn well in a mix of a lot of other people. And then individuals can have preferences all along the spectrum between those two extremes. What if you're one of those highly individualistic learners? Things are going well in your course, but then all of a sudden you get stuck and you don't know what to do. If you hadn't reached out for any social support, you have nowhere to turn. And what if you're one of those very social people and from the beginning of the course you have no one to connect with because typical online learning doesn't put you in touch with other learners? So what can you do to solve the lack of social support inherent in most online classes? Well, I encourage you to do what so many students already know how to do to find a social network, and that is use social networks. Use Facebook, use Twitter, use text, use emails to reach out to students in your online class and find social connections with them. And I encourage you to do what a lot of my students have said really works for them, and that is just hang out through social networks. You don't have to always be talking about class. Form informal relationships, the kind of relationships that you can enjoy being with them. Think about the face-to-face class and how as you leave you're often just chatting about things not related to the class. Do that socially online in social networks. Form those relationships and then you can tap into them when you need help in the course. And please don't forget one great technology, this thing, the phone. It is still probably the most powerful way to connect with people in online learning, to connect with others in your class, so that you can reach out to them when you need help. Because often a 5-minute conversation with this work so much more effectively than a whole bunch of texts or emails bouncing back and forth. And you can hear and feel the social support that happens in an actual conversation. Another thing I'd like you to think about being successful in online learning is thinking itself. A strange thing happens in online learning. All that we've learned about thinking well in face-to-face classes just seems to go out the window. So think for a minute about how the face-to-face classroom helps you know how well you're actually thinking about course material. And think about two interactions that happen during face-to-face classes. First is with all those students sitting around you. You have a sense, usually, whether you understand as well as almost everybody in the class does, or perhaps you're behind everyone's understanding, or even better, you're ahead. The second type of interaction in the face-to-face classroom that helps you gauge your thinking is with instructors themselves. They give you cues that help you know, usually, how well you're doing. And it could be subtle, like vocal inflection, where they pause, or where they step away from the podium to make a point of emphasis. In an online course, not only are those cues not there, but we also struggle with bringing in a type of interaction we've gotten from social media, where we scan information, skip information, decide what we value quickly and maybe just press a like button. And then when we make a response, it's typically not with academic rigor or academic language. Years ago, one of my students taught me something powerful about online learning. So powerful that it changed that course and almost every online course that I've taught since then. I noticed that her posts were different in the course, but I also noticed that the rest of our posts were changing too because of what she was doing. So when I asked her about it, she said, well, I decided to take a deep breath and to slow down and to really plunge into the discussion. And she's onto something there. Because what I realized when she said, slow down and take a deep breath, I realized she was engaging and she got the rest of us to engage in a true academic discussion. So what can you do in light of all of that to think well in an online course? Well, the main thing is to keep in mind what you know from other learning settings about academic thought, academic discussions, and academic rigor. Don't lose those things. Don't go into social chit-chat mode like we're used to online. Instead, like my student learned, slow down, read other people's posts for the academic thinking, respond with academic language, and look for the academic rigor that comes when you're learning together with a group of people. Well, there you have it. 3 ways to learn more effectively in an online course. Find a schedule and stick to it. Find a social support network and lean on them when you need help. And lean on them just to enjoy the learning process more. And then use academic language, use academic discussions to find the academic rigor in the course so that you're really learning. Hopefully, you've seen that there are some things from the face-to-face classroom that really do come over straight into online learning with no changes. But hopefully you're also seeing that some of the things that work well in the face-to-face classroom actually trip us up in online learning because they don't work there. We have to do something differently. Hope all that helps.